Well, hello, my friend. I hope you're doing amazing today. And as always, I thank you for taking some time out of your day to share and share it with me. You might be able to tell from the tone of my voice that I'm not doing so amazing today. And I'm not doing so amazing because a friend of mine, someone who you might be familiar with if you're following me and know the Jodi Arias trial, Shanna Hogan. I recently learned of her passing and certainly kind of hit me. And I guess I'm here on this video today to just kind of talk about her and our relationship in hopes that it'll help cure me of some of my sadness and maybe do the same for you. And I entitled this video A Cover, a Book, and a Wonderful Thought because I think that encapsulates my relationship with Shanna. And I think it really enlightens who she is and who she surrounded herself with. I first came to know Shanna, probably like many of you, as during the Jodi Arias trial. I knew her initially as a reporter in that trial. I would see her every day in court, and sometimes I would see her sitting on the sidewalk waiting to get into the portable studio to do a spot for HLN. Because she was a reporter, we really didn't talk a lot back then. And quite frankly, in honesty, she said some things about me that I didn't think were so great on TV, and I wasn't really pleased with that. But that was okay. There were a lot of people saying that, and it didn't really hold a lot of personal animosity. It just didn't lend itself towards any warmth, I guess. And that situation kind of stayed the way it was until the trial resolved itself in April of 2015. More specifically, later that fall, after I had publicly come out with the fact that I was battling at the time stage 3 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Because it was around this time that Shanna was working for the Phoenix New Times. It's a local newspaper magazine. And she had reached out to me for an interview. And I was kind of skeptical of this interview, in honesty, because of some of the things I referenced earlier. And the specifics aren't even important, quite frankly. I don't remember them now, which adds to the trivialness of it all. But she had reached out to me, and we then had a conversation, and I told her some of my concerns, and we had a conversation about them. And I could tell that she was a warm-hearted person and didn't really mean any ill intent from some of the things she said. And we had a great discussion, a discussion that made me think really put her in high regard, I guess, and made me certainly more than willing to do the interview. So a couple weeks later, whenever it was, she came to my office and we sat and we talked. And we had a great conversation. I opened up a lot to her. I felt very comfortable talking to her about my life and about my battles with cancer. And one of the conditions of the interview, I should back up, I guess, and say, is that I wanted it to be a cover story. If you've read my book, you know that I don't normally, put conditions on interviews, but on this one, I wanted to because I wanted it to be read. I wanted the attention of the passerby that picks up this free newspaper out of a machine to be drawn towards the story and actually read it. So that was agreed to in advance, of course, and the story was written, and she shared that with me, and I thought it was great. And then she shared the cover with me after it had already been generated. And those of you who have seen me post on social media, maybe I'll post it later, know that they spelled my name wrong during on that cover. And I remember Shanna reaching out to me, and she was mortified and embarrassed and just could not apologize enough. And to me, that showed so much character for her because it wasn't her mistake, right? And I assured her that I wasn't upset with her and that I understood and that these things happen. And that became a turning point for us because I think in that discussion, we created a friendship. You know, we had both been through some common experiences together in the Arias trial, right? And I know they were from different aspects, different sides of the fence, if you will. But we had both gone through that experience in different ways for the almost 6 months of the first trial, and I think it was 4 or 5 for the second. We'd both been involved in that tragedy and with those people. So a kinship struck up, and I remember I would often kid her at times about how somebody over the course of the Arias trial or subsequent to it, whenever her book came out, Picture Perfect, Shanna's book, had sent me a copy of her book. And I remember I would joke with her about eventually she's going to have to sign that book for me. Eventually she's going to have to sign it. And she would always say, of course, of course, of course, and we'll get together one of these days. And that book is sitting in my office unsigned. Unsigned because, as fate would have it, last time I saw her, it was down at that I can remember anyway, it was down at the Tucson Book Fair. I came to support her and check out the fair, and her and Billy Jensen were giving a talk about their books, and she was talking about the Marine Wife book, and it was cool. I had a chance to introduce her to my wife, and we sat and talked for about a half hour, and she was very pregnant with her son Xander at this time, and we had talked about getting together, and of course I knew that she was kind of going to be busy with a new baby for a while, so that book signing was always something that was going to happen down the road. And, you know, obviously after a couple months after Xander, she was kind of coming back to life, as it were, and we had talked about a couple projects together. There was some projects we were talking about doing TV shows, that sort of thing, and we communicated back and forth. And as a matter of fact, she was the first person that made me aware of Miss Arias' appeal having been decided. And we always stayed in contact and had that kinship. And then a few days later, like many of you, I found out about the accident she had. An accident that sent her into the intensive care unit, and an accident from which she never recovered. And it certainly made me think about life and those contacts we have and those meetings we always say we're going to have and never quite get around to. And of course, with Shanna and I, with this thing, it was understandable, a new baby, and then the COVID era, and obviously she's going to be protective of that baby. So that coffee date we were talking about having never happened, and that book, that copy of her book, the unsigned book, will always be with me. And, you know, there's so much tragedy. That book, you know, is immaterial compared to the pain that obviously a lot of people are going through, most prominently her husband and her son. But I point it out because I think there's lessons in this, and I've made videos on this before about really getting out there and making sure that those some days we're going to get together become reality, because you don't know when those some days are going to run out. And I want to close with one more thing, because I think it's important when we talk about this whole Jodi Arias situation. I apologize, getting a little teary-eyed here, but again, like I've always done in these videos, I promise to bring my authenticity to it. I remember a while back, probably about a year ago now, maybe over a year ago, I was in Seattle performing my one-man show, my first one-man show. And another person you might have known, and a friend of Shanna, named Paul Sanders, was at the show, and I invited him to invited him to join my friends and family in that regard to come out to dinner. It was a matinee show, and come out to dinner with us and talk. And we did. And I wound up at it was a big long table. I wound up pretty close to Paul. And I remember we were talking about, some of the mutual acquaintances we'd made, over the course of time. And I remember saying to him that it always seemed funny to me to have these relationships that were born out of this tragic event. This horrific murder trial, and all these people's lives were affected. And here I've made friendships and kinships with people. Somehow it didn't seem right. You know what I'm saying? And I expressed that to Paul, and Paul said something to me that I think is telling to this situation, my relationship with Shanna, and our relationship with everybody when we talk about the tragedy of this trial, everybody that was involved, because there is so much tragedy around it. Of course, most prominently felt by Mr. Alexander and his loved ones, but by many people as well that were drug in to Miss Arias's homicidal conduct. And what he said to me was, I think it was the spirit, and I'm paraphrasing, of Travis that is bringing us all together. And I thought that was a really beautiful thought. And my hope when I talk about this relationship with Shanna and her life and her legacy, I hope that moving forward and working on mending those fences and creating the kind of relationship, the kind of friendship I have with Shanna, is something we should all work towards, because there's been so much tragedy around this case. So much name callings, mostly in my direction, I know, but, in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different directions. And as I've said in my book, it's a tragedy, and it just needs to stop. And I know I've talked with Shanna about that a lot. So I hope you'll consider that, consider everything I've said, so that this life and this tragic loss can have meaning beyond today, beyond this video, and hopefully impact all our lives for the good moving forward. With that, my friends, I thank you so much for, again, taking the time. I wish you well. I love you. And let's move forward with love and peace in our hearts. Thank you so much.